If somebody knew exactly the date on which they were going to pass away, do you think that would give them more reassurance, more peace of mind, more confidence, knowing they knew exactly when to call in their loved ones and say farewell? They knew exactly when to wrap up their affairs, when to close down their bank account, when to stop paying life insurance. Or do you think that would cause more anxiety, more concern? Would it be more difficult, less peace of mind? Even if it was 10, 20, 30, 40 years away, but they knew exactly the date on which they were going to pass away. We're told that one should, ethics of our fathers, one should repent, shuv yom echad lifnei mitatach, repent the day before you die. And then the classic question that the classics ask is, well, but if I don't know, how's anybody supposed to know when they were going to die? And the answer is, repent every day, for tomorrow may well be the day. Can you imagine if somebody actually knew that tomorrow wasn't the day, but they knew exactly which day it was? And did that ever happen in history? Why am I asking this question? Because tonight we begin the anniversary of the 3,331st time since the Jewish people observed Tisha B'Av as the saddest day in the Jewish calendar. It's the day in which the first temple was destroyed by the Babylonians, the day in which the Romans destroyed the second temple, together with the vast tragedies that occurred alongside that, the mass murder, expulsion, etc., and multiple other tragic events in Jewish history. It's the day in which we will sit down this evening and read Lamentations sitting on the floor with the lights dimmed. It's a very sad day. What's the origin of it? What happened 3,331 years ago? Well, the answer is that the 12 spies that the Jewish people had sent from the desert to spy out the land, to scout out, to see how to conquer this land that God had promised to Abraham 400 years earlier. The spies return and 10 of the 12 say, we can't do this. The people there are giants, the fruit are weird, we better stay put in the desert. Let's just pitch camp here. Why risk the consequences of going to the land? And God says, well, if they don't want to go to the land, punishment, they will never get to the land. Instead, their children in 40 years' time will inherit the land that I promised Abraham. But there would be a delay for 40 years, and in the 40 years, they would just have to wander around that small sliver of desert somewhere between Beersheba and Eilat for 40 years. Not a vast space. You think of this massive area. That's it. 40 years in that small area of that desert. I calculated if they had gone just 1 kilometer a day, they could have easily arrived in Beersheba in less than 6 months. Across the entire region in less than 6 months. It took them 40 years. And every single year, the Medrash is brought down in Talmud Yerushalmi, and I want to share with you specifically the quote from Medrash Eicha. The Medrash describes what happened every year on the anniversary of Tisha B'Av, the date in which the 12 spies had come back, the 10 with the negative report. Because that was the date in which, for the next 40 years, anyone who turned 60 in the coming year would die. Which meant that from that first time, Moses told the people that as a consequence of your actions, on Tisha B'Av, anyone turning 60 in the next 12 months will die. And the Medrash says, Amar Rabbi Levi says, every evening of Tisha B'Av, every afternoon of Tisha B'Av. So today, 3,300 years ago, Moses would go out into the camp and make an announcement. And he would say, everyone go out and dig graves. And everyone would go out, dig graves in the sand and go to sleep. And in the morning, an announcement was made. An announcement was passed around the camp. Arise! And everyone rose except for those who would turn 60 in the coming year. And all of those people passed away. And this happened year after year after year. Everyone in that first year who was now 20 knew that their death would be coming in 40 years' time on Tisha B'Av. And we know that after that final Tisha B'Av, Aaron passes away just a couple of weeks earlier on the 1st of Av. 6 months later, Moses passes away on the 7th of Adar, and then the Jewish people, led by Joshua, enter the land. What happened on that last Tisha B'Av? Says the Medrash, Ubishnat Arba'im Ha'acharon, in the 40th year, they did the same. The announcement was made, dig your graves, and all of these people dug their graves. And in the morning, they were all alive. They all wake up. And they think to themselves, perhaps we've erred in the date. Maybe today is just the 8th of Av. Maybe we've got the date wrong. We've known for 40 years that because we were in our 20th year when the spies came back, we were going to die. We are not going to merit to go into the land of Israel alongside our children. Perhaps we've got the date wrong. So the next night, they lie down in the grave again. And they do the same thing the next night. The 11th, the 12th, the 13th, the 14th. The 14th, they lie down in the grave. It's now the night going into the 15th. It's the 15th of Av. They look up at the sky and they see the full moon. They realize that the date has passed. Amro, so they say, it appears that God has nullified the decree, and they make the date a festival. Wonderful. Can you imagine the atmosphere? They've thought for 40 years that they're going to die in the desert, and instead, not just don't they die, but they realize that now they are going to be part of the people entering the land, fulfilling that promise that God made to Abraham 440 years earlier. What a wonderful, wonderful experience. They would finally be able, despite 40 years of thinking otherwise, be able to enter the land. Even Moses wouldn't. But they, led by the 2 spies who came back with the good news, Caleb accompanying them, but Joshua as their leader, would lead them into the land. There's a fascinating bit of discussion because this medrash that I'm quoting is actually discussed in a number of different places. It's discussed in Talmud Yerushalmi. I'm specifically quoting it from the medrash, and there's a reason why I'm doing so. Because there's something really fascinating about the story. From the Talmud Yerushalmi, it implies that the day that the people in the desert made as a festival, when they realized that they've survived the punishment, it's not going to be applied to them. The date that they make as a festival is the 15th of Av, the day that they recognize that the decree has been nullified. The day when they look up at the sky, they see the full moon, and they realize they're not going to die. What a wonderful experience. They turn it into a festival. In fact, Mishnah Ta'anit discusses the fact that lo hayo yamim tovim b'Yisrael k'chamisha asa ba'av, that it's one of the greatest dates in the Jewish calendar. But from this medrash implies something different. In this medrash, it implies that they actually made Tisha B'Av, the 9th of Av itself, as a festival. When day 15 came around and they realized that the decree had passed, they said the 9th of Av is no longer a day of sadness. For us, for 39 years, we saw this day as a day of tragedy, a day of failure. A day in which we let down God, and a day in which we had to face the consequences that we would die in the desert. And now we realize that this day is the day of our salvation. We didn't die on this day. The decree is passed. The day is now a wonderful day. The day is now a positive day. The day is now one of hope, one of salvation, one of peace of mind, one of opportunity. And here we are able to go into the land of Israel because of this date. And they made the 9th of Av into the day of festival. In fact, the Medrash concludes and says, as a result of our the subsequent sins of our people later, the temple was destroyed twice. Quoting, Vayivku ha'am balayla hahu. They cried on that night, and the prophet Jeremiah says, Echa yashva vadad, how we sit alone, as a result of repeating the crying that our ancestors did on this night. Remarkable scene. For 40 years, these people thought they were going to never merit to enter the land. And suddenly, their negative view, their whole pessimism, their lack of hope, and perhaps rightfully so, justifiably so, suddenly all dissipates. And suddenly there's opportunity, there's hope. We can go into the land, we're not going to die. And the profound lesson for us. Tonight we can enter Tisha B'Av in one of two ways. We can enter Tisha B'Av with one of melancholy, looking back on the tragedies and the sadness of 3,331 years of sadness, 1,951 years since the Romans decimated our holy land, destroyed Jerusalem, leaving it in ruins from which until today we desperately wish that the temple be rebuilt and peace be restored, not just to our people but to all the world. For 1,951 years we've been praying on this night that Mashiach should finally come and make the world a perfect place, a world filled with final peace. So it's a sad night. It's a reflective night. It's a difficult night. But perhaps beneath the surface we can remember that actually 3,291 years ago, tonight, a group of people in the desert discovered that tonight is a night filled with hope, with opportunity, and with salvation. Are we just looking backwards, or are we also looking forwards? Are we just reflective of the sadness that happened to our people? Or do we recognize that we have been on a positive trajectory ever since? And that trajectory will lead us one day to the world of the Messianic era, a world of peace, a world of perfection, a world of divine revelation, a world of joy, a world of happiness, a world of opportunity. And perhaps tonight is the night where within our sadness, within our reflection, within our melancholy looking back on 3,000 years of failure and sadness, we can also be inspired to be reminded of that trajectory that we're on. And the fact that this day can be changed in just one single moment to a day of hope, to a day of happiness, to a day of joy. And so that we will once again be able to hear the realization of the words that the Medrash says here, that they made 9th of Av itself, Va'asa'uhu Yom Tov, they made it into a festival because they realized this day has been transformed. Please God, very soon in our days. May it be tonight.